de poder, no solamente en el Estado plurinacional de Bolivia, sino también en todo el mundo. Hay muchas mujeres que quisiéramos estar en estos espacios de poder hacer alianzas de lucha. Y realmente hoy veo muchas mujeres en esta sala que están comprometidas de llevar esa semilla desde este lugar y ir a sembrar a nuestras casas. Poder generar los compromisos como países y como mujeres para poder desarrollar la transformación de vida diferente, sensible, con respeto y con igualdad. Tener los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y de las mujeres de la ciudad sean los mismos y no sean ahora como ahora. El mundo es diferenciado, el mundo es diferente. Muchos estamos en espacios más altos y otros estamos olvidados y no queremos eso, queremos ser iguales porque tenemos los mismos derechos y somos también humanos. Muchas gracias, hermanas. Un callaya, que la Pacha los bendiga, y un saludo especial a nuestro hermano Sharman. Cuando vino a Bolivia fui quien la recibió con los brazos abiertos para poder hacer conocer también mi país. Y estoy muy agradecida de estar acá juntamente también en este espacio, de poder ver este gran desarrollo y los compromisos de gobiernos que se vayan cumpliendo y no solo queden en papeles y en acuerdos, sino que se cumplan, hermanas. Un callaya. Muchas gracias.
Angelica, thank you for that impassioned intervention. Women are the keepers of life. If we all take that home with us, I think we will be making great progress. Monica, if I may, Monica Medina, the US Assistant Secretary, and if I may ask you to try and stick to 3 minutes, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, delegates, friends, and excellencies. First, let me thank Alok Sharma and the UK presidency and the entire team for leading such an important event. And I also want to acknowledge the tireless work of one of our fellow speakers here today, our Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. It's an honor. I just want to say what an honor it is to be here on the heels of passing the bipartisan infrastructure legislation in our country that she engineered. It's a once-in-a-generation investment in our country to turn this climate crisis into an opportunity. So I want to thank her for her leadership and the leadership that it will allow us to have at home and abroad. As I look around this room, and the millions of women and girls leading this movement, I see an incredible group of environmental defenders. We're using our voices to call for the changes we need, protecting our communities and nature, and leading the innovations of the future. But even as we take action, women and girls are so often the ones bearing the brunt of the climate crisis. I heard just yesterday from two remarkable female leaders from Uganda and Nigeria. They spoke about how climate impacts in their communities mean that too many women are losing their traditional livelihoods, struggling to provide food for themselves and their families, and facing increased risks of violence and conflict. This is a topic of critical importance here at COP26, but one that has too often been sidelined from the discussion in these halls. But these intersections and the disproportionate impacts of climate change can no longer be ignored. My friend and Executive Director of the White House Gender Policy Council, Jen Klein, recently said climate change is not gender neutral. And my friend Samantha Power, our USAID Administrator, put it even more pointedly: climate change is sexist. Women and girls, especially those who are members of marginalized populations, are on the front lines of this crisis. Climate-related disasters hinder access to essential services, including sexual and reproductive health care. Women are less likely to have emergency savings compared to men, and women can often be the ones left behind in dangerous situations following disasters. So let me skip ahead to the programs that the U.S. has brought forth at this incredible COP. Let me just list a few. First, we have our national strategy on gender equity and equality, which has dedicated an entire chapter to women. We've also launched a new Gender Equity and Equality Action Fund with at least $14 million to be invested in gender-responsive climate programming on women and girls, participation in the green economy, and resilience to climate shocks. Our USAID is scaling up its advanced gender in the Environment Initiative in partnership with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature to provide tailored support to countries to develop climate change gender action plans. It's fitting that today is also Science and Innovation Day here at COP because women are also leading the way in the scientific field. Our USAID is partnering with NASA to make a $3 million investment in Surveyor, a program that will build opportunities for women in the sciences and translate that innovation into resilience for women farmers on the ground. And my colleagues at the State Department are putting forward more than $5 million towards a range of gender and climate programs. So in closing, I just want to emphasize that the climate future is female. Why? I think it is because we deliver life. We are mothers, we are daughters, we are sisters, wives, and grandmothers and girlfriends, and our connection to this issue is primal. For me, it began with my daughter who had severe asthma as a young girl, and I watched her struggle on a breathing machine for just the very air to breathe. And it continues with my mother, who is a passionate advocate for elephants, and it reminds me every day that we must protect nature. We as women are connected. We are at the forefront of this crisis, and we're at the forefront of the solutions. Why? Because that's what women have always done. They've protected their communities, the nature surrounding them, and used their voices to call for the changes we need, and then figured out how to do it. Thank you all, and let's get to work.
Thank you, Monica. Indeed, I think the climate future is indeed female. And thank you to the US for your enormous commitments and that you're very much back at the forefront of helping us to solve this challenge. If I may, I'll turn now to our Swedish colleague, the Minister for International Development Cooperation, Per Rosenfrith.
Thank you, Minister. Indeed, a pleasure and an honor to be here. We've had 1.5 years of COVID-19, a time of backsliding, hard-won gains for human rights, gender equality, democracy are being rolled back as we speak, as we meet. The inequality setback is clearly the result of an incomplete analysis of the needs of a society in crisis. And on top of this, we have the climate crisis. Worldwide, women have less access than men to voice and power and resources such as land, credit, agricultural inputs, decision-making structures, technology, training, extension services that would enhance their capacity to adapt to climate change. Now, women are not the polluters of this world, yet they carry the consequences of climate change on their shoulders. Women represent the majority of the world's poor, are proportionally more dependent on threatened natural resources for their livelihood. And this is true, particularly in rural areas where women shoulder the major responsibility for household water supply and energy, for cooking, heating, as well as for food security. 1 in 3 girls does not have access to clean water and often lack facilities for menstrual hygiene. Without a gender perspective, we risk to miss out on long-term sustainable solutions. We miss out on invaluable knowledge needed for a sustainable green transition. So we need to include women in all types of decision makers. Now, I represent a feminist government, and Sweden conducts a feminist foreign policy. This means that me and my colleagues need to ensure in every decision we make that women and girls should have the same rights, same duties, the same possibilities as men and boys. A sustainable planet, sustainable peace, security and development cannot be achieved if half of the world's population are excluded. Now, Minister, in 2019, Sweden adopted a climate policy action plan, which states that a gender perspective is to permeate all climate action. Climate action should be based on the different prerequisites and equal possibilities of rights of women and girls, as well as men and boys. Gender equality has been systematically mainstreamed into Sweden's development cooperation, and Sweden has spearheaded efforts to adopt ambitious gender policies, not least in the multilateral climate funds. In 2020, the Swedish government assigned the Swedish Environment Protection Agency to integrate a gender perspective in all their core operations. The agency has also developed a proposal for national strategy to integrate a gender perspective in the implementation of the Paris Agreement in Sweden, and this plan is now currently processed by the government. Now, the transition to low-carbon development and climate change adaptation is a major transformative endeavor requiring the participation of all countries, all communities, and people of all gender. Gender-equal societies are less likely to end up in conflict. Women's equal rights and opportunities are essential, not only for achieving justice and equality, but also for economic development, for sustainability. A feminist approach and an ambitious climate efforts are not only issues of rights, it's simply the only smart thing to do. And Sweden is ready to continue to lead on climate action, to continue to lead on gender equality, not as two different things, but two mutually reinforcing sides of the same thing, and that thing being our common future. With that, allow me to thank you, Minister, for convening this important meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for showing the way, and I think Sweden's gender equality throughout all policy is a beacon for many, many others to try and follow. So thank you for your leadership on that. If I may now turn to Nigeria, we have with us Mr. Musa Hassan, who is the Permanent Secretary and Deputy Minister for Nigeria. Mr. Hassan.
Thank you very much for this invitation, Honourable Minister, and all delegates available. Nigeria faces various environmental challenges which are climate change induced, such as erosion, flooding, landslides, etc. These problems in turn have an adverse effect on livelihoods within the communities, especially our farmers, women, and children. However, the direct impact of these challenges has already put a lot of women in serious problems. In implementing the Paris Agreement and Nigeria's national determined contributions, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change at the Conference of Parties, COP23, adopted a gender action plan which would be integrated into parties' climate promises in the Paris Agreement. For a more holistic action plan, it is important that Nigeria has a unified voice on gender and climate change issues. In domesticating the Gender Action Plan, a national action plan on gender and climate change was developed. The goal of the action plan is to ensure that national climate change processes in Nigeria mainstream gender considerations to guarantee inclusiveness of all required. The document will serve as a guide into climate change and challenges to women. The need to mainstream climate change into national action plans and action cannot be overemphasized, though the priority sectors covered in action plan were selected according to Nigerian national determined contribution and the economic recovery and growth plan. In July 2016, the Federal Ministry of Environment, through the Department of Climate Change, commenced the process of developing the Gender Action Plan by organizing stakeholders' consultative workshop. A draft national action plan was developed as an output. Further consultations were done, and subsequently, Nigeria was able to develop her own action plan on gender. I have it here. What is now required is action. We need more support, more technical support and financial support, but Nigeria is just on the right track because we also have other agencies that are directly responsible for women affairs. We have Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, we have Women Development Centers, we have other areas also that have even our Constitution has a direct effect on the issues and challenges of women and children. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. You're quite right, and the hashtag for today is Act on the Gap. I think that's exactly the message that you bring so strongly to these discussions. Thank you very much indeed. If I may now turn to Canada and the Ambassador for the Environment, Patricia Fuller. Patricia.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. En tant qu'ambassadrice du Canada pour les changements climatiques, je suis honorée d'être présente à cette discussion très importante. Canada is fully committed to advancing gender equality in climate action, not only because women are more impacted by climate change, but also because climate action cannot be effective without the full participation of women. In Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, partners who have worked with us over the past 5 years know well that Canada has placed gender equality at the center of all of our development projects. So this has meant in projects that range from, for example, advancing the leadership of women in water security projects in the Peruvian Andes with the application of indigenous knowledge, to advancing the participation of women negotiators in the UNFCCC process. So I'm pleased to announce today that as part of the doubling of Canada's climate finance pledge to $5.3 billion over 5 years, that Canada will apply the target of 80% for projects that will target gender equality outcomes. That project in our action. I'm also that climate coalition and advocacy consider climate action of the plan of the UNFCCC, and just a few weeks ago we presented a formal submission to the UNFCCC highlighting the gender differentiated impacts of climate change and the role of women as agents of change in Canada. Donc, j'espère qu'en faisant la promotion des engagements et des mesures qui favorisent les sexes dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques, nous apporterons une réponse mondiale à ce fléau climatique qui sera réellement inclusive. So, to conclude, we need all involved, because if we are to win the fight against climate change, we need to have women participating equally in climate action. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Patricia, thank you, and thank you for Canada's commitment that 80% of your projects will have gender equality outcomes as a necessity. That is a huge leap and something that I think all countries should consider. That's the sort of way that quietly and effectively we can shift the dial here. Thank you. If I may, I'll turn to Ecuador and the Undersecretary for Climate Change, Ms. Karina Barrera. Karina.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alok Sharma, distinguished panelists, and everybody, good morning. I want to start my speech saying there are different ways to look at women's role in climate action. Some will see us vulnerable actors or victims of the effects of climate change. But today, I want to highlight the importance of women as agents of change to transform the territories